So what's on tap for today, folks? It's another reaction video, and this time it's one of our favorite senators, and it's Tom Cotton, who's interviewing Ketanji Brown Jackson, and he's asking her a simple question, basically, and that is, why is it that so many of your sentences that you gave to hardened criminals were so light? In other words, they weren't the mandatories. You had discretion to give sentences. Why were they so light and so short? So we're going to get into all that. But before we do so, we just want to remind you to subscribe to the channel. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your humble host for today. My name is Dr. Shaikh. And hit that notification bell, like and share this video. Let's get into this reaction video of Tom Cotton grilling and questioning Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Of cases in which a sentence is not reduced for public safety reasons because someone is viewed as too dangerous to release that early is 1%. It's 1%. Judge, do you remember a man named Keith Young?
Yes.
Good. For the benefit of my colleagues, let me quickly cover the basics of his case. You sentenced him in 2018. Keith Young was a career criminal who had previously been convicted of trafficking cocaine. In 2017, he was running a drug business in his house where his children lived and was found with 2 1-kilogram bricks of heroin worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, along with a gun, ammunition, thousands of dollars in cash, and equipment to cut and package heroin for retail sale. The drug lab also confirmed that there was fentanyl in both bricks of heroin. And in one of the 2 bricks, there was actually more fentanyl than there was heroin. While at the D.C. jail awaiting trial, Young bragged about his arrest and about how he was a kingpin. Those are his words, not mine. Kingpin. He was even recorded calling his wife and brother to give them instructions on collecting drug money from people for him. The prosecutors filed a notice of Young's criminal history, which meant he faced a mandatory minimum of 20 years. You did not seem to like that, Judge. In fact, at his sentencing, you said, this is a quote, that you shared his frustration, that you couldn't give him a lighter sentence.
Why is it that these judges, every single time, it seems that most of these progressive judges, these judges that are leftists, these judges that are thinking that they're social justice warriors, that want to legislate from the bench, that don't want to follow the law, that Congress has put these laws forward, and that basically that they have some discretion inside there, but these are hardened criminals. These are criminals that have done evil things that they've done. And one of the things that has to happen is that every time they continually seem to try to advocate for criminal rights. In other words, why don't we think about, oh, the criminal has rights. He's got a family. He's got to survive. He's doing things. Who knows why he was doing this? Maybe his father was mean to him. Maybe he didn't have a good upbringing. Maybe he had a really bad childhood. Maybe he didn't go to school for a long time. He's had a lot of problems along the way, and we need to help him as much as possible. In other words, these judges care more and more about the rights of criminals than they do about delivering justice to the people that they've committed the crimes against. In other words, the victims. The victims are completely left out of this thing here. And that's exactly what this judge does, as do so many other judges that are leftists just like her.
I was shocked to see this in the transcript. I was also shocked that you apologized to this drug kingpin for having to follow the law. You literally said that you didn't think 20 years was fair. This is the quote. And for this, I am sorry. Mostly because...
I wonder if she said sorry or apologized to the victims here of the drugs, these drugs that he peddled, that he sold. I wonder if she said sorry and that she was having any empathy or any feeling towards what those people have suffered, those families that have suffered, if those drugs have killed children or killed adults or got people hooked on drugs, or, you know, the whole myriad of things that happen when drugs enter someone's life.
As I believe in second chances. You apologize to this career criminal, a drug kingpin, in his own words, He was not some low-level first-time drug offender who made a bad choice. That was in 2018. But in 2020, you got a second chance. After Young's sentence, Congress passed something called the First Step Act, which reduced sentences for serious drug traffickers with lengthy criminal records. During the pandemic, lots of criminals like Keith Young tried to twist the First Step Act's compassionate release provision, which was intended for terminally ill elderly inmates to get early release and blame it on COVID. You had none of that, and that's good. You rightly said at his resentencing hearing, quote, COVID-19 is not only present in prisons, and you said that Young's past as a smoker and his claim of various other health issues did not entitle him to early release. If you had stopped there, I would have cited that as a great example of how you follow the law and made a well-reasoned decision. Unfortunately, you didn't stop there. You said in the resentencing that, quote, Congress did not make their changes under the First Step.
Take a look. She hates this. You can just see. Look at the facial expression. Look at the eyes. Look at the glasses down the bridge of the... I mean, just look at this thing here. Her whole thing, her pursed lips, her whole demeanor, her hands are crossed. She's all tense. She's hating this thing, that he's bringing this thing up, that people are realizing that, look, what did she do? She went easy, and she's going easy on these career criminals. These aren't people that are just doing a couple of things, shoplifting or whatever. These are hardened criminals who are dealing in hardcore drugs, obviously violent offenses as well being committed. And she just wants to err on the side of being, nice and apologizing to these criminals that she has to follow the law. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Step Act retroactive. That if they had, then you could have given him a reduced sentence. But then you said, no matter what the law says, and this is a quote, Judge, the court feels as though in this moment, per Mr. Young's compassionate release motion, the court is being called upon to evaluate the length of his sentence under the revised section of the law in the First Step Act. And so it is almost as if I am sentencing him today. And if I were to do so, he would face a sentence that would be well below the 240 months that Mr. Young received. And so for that reason, I will grant Mr. Young's motion. Judge Jackson, before you granted this fentanyl kingpin's motion to reduce his sentence, did you contact any of the victims from his case?
Senator, thank you for allowing me to address Mr. Young's situation.
I asked a simple question. Did you contact the victims in his case or not?
Senator, Mr. Young was not released. His sentence was reduced, and I did not contact the victims in his case because there were no victims. He committed a crime.
What do you mean there were no victims? Of course there were victims. He was selling drugs. Of course there are victims here. But you didn't want to contact anybody. You just wanted to just not do... I mean, of course, why would you contact the victims?
Crime, a drug crime. There were no identifiable victims in his case.
Drug crime is not a victimless crime. 100,000 Americans were killed by overdoses.
Understood, Senator, but there was no one to contact because there were no identifiable...
Judge, you just acknowledged that you did not release him. You're right, you didn't release him. He filed a motion for compassionate release. You denied that rightly. But you reduced his sentence. He didn't file a motion to reduce his sentence. He wasn't eligible for a reduced sentence under the First Step Act because it wasn't retroactive towards him. You took a motion for compassionate release to get out of prison and turned it into a motion to reduce a sentence. So he's going to be released 7.5 years earlier, years from now. Last week, Judge, when we talked in our office, you talked about a lot about judicial restraint. Is transforming his motion for compassionate release into a motion to reduce a sentence for this drug trafficking kingpin an example of judicial restraint, Judge?
Yes, Senator, it is, and I will explain how. Mr. Young, as you say, was facing originally a sentence of 20 years in prison, which I imposed. I tried Mr. Young, who went to trial, primarily because he was facing such a long penalty. I looked at the evidence in his case. He was absolutely the kingpin that you're talking about. But the way that our laws work, the 20-year sentence that he received for the amount of heroin that he had was increased based on a sentence that he received, I think it was 10 or 15 years before. He had no criminal history between the old sentence. Forgive me, I can't remember exactly what it is, and I'm sure people will look it up. But 10, 15 years before, he had some minor sentence. Then he had this really obviously serious, terrible sentence. And the government filed what is called an 851, which is an enhancement based on his really, really old prior criminal history. I followed the law, which said that he had to go to jail for 20 years. It would have been more like 10 years if the government hadn't taken into account his very old criminal history. But I said, fine, this is the law, I'm following it, you're going to jail for 20 years.
Good.
In the interim, COVID happens. We get lots of compassionate release motions, and there's a statute that Congress has enacted which allows defendants to seek compassionate release, to seek reduction of their sentence, not just release, reduction, release, some adjustment to their penalty under the law if there are extraordinary and compelling reasons to do so. That's the quote from the statute.
There are no compelling reasons to do so. He's a career criminal. Lock him up and basically throw away the key until he's served his sentence and his time. That's what you need to do. You don't need to go ahead and reinvent and give compassionate circumstances to people that don't deserve any type of compassion because of what they've done. These are hardened criminals. They wouldn't give you compassion. There's no reason for the law to give them compassion. The law is just there to have, the time period set for these people to be put away. If they serve their time, the entire time that they're supposed to serve, then when they come out, start anew. And if they get caught again, sentence them again and continue on with that.
Extraordinary and compelling reasons. Doesn't say anything more narrow than that, although you do have to look at the guidelines related to compassionate release. All of which I did related to his motion, and he argued several things. He argued his smoking, his asthma. These were reasons, he said, for compassionate release, and I disagreed. What I did find extraordinary and compelling is the fact that between the 20-year sentence that I gave him originally and the compassionate release motion that he filed, Congress changed the law. Congress decided that the old penalty, the old crime, was no longer eligible for the increased, so that a person who was convicted at the time of his compassionate release motion for doing exactly what Mr. Young had done would not get a 20-year sentence. That would not be lawful for a person at that moment. And one of the things that Congress says to the judges is care about unwarranted sentencing disparity. Care about the fact that the person you're sentencing is being treated differently than someone else who committed exactly the same crime. And I understand it wasn't retroactive in the sense that everybody, absent a compassionate release motion, wouldn't have been eligible for resentencing. But here I have a defendant before me and all of the factors that Congress has asked me to take into account, and a compelling argument that there were extraordinary and compelling circumstances, that is a change in the law, that would create unwarranted sentencing disparity if I didn't take account of it. And so
if you took account of it, you could have just left it the way it is, let him run his appeals, and let it run through the court system again and then see if somebody agrees with that. But no, you decided, because you wanted to be an activist judge, you decided to say, you know what, this is where I'm going to make my stand. I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and do this anyways. And that, judge, is the reason why you and others like yourselves, the progressives, the moderates, are always, always, always thinking on the side of the criminals. How can we be of a benefit to them? How can we be of a service to the criminals? You never once think about how you can be of service, how you can be of benefit to give justice to the victims.
I determined under those circumstances is that I would resentence Mr. Young to the penalty that Congress had decided was the appropriate penalty for the conduct that he committed as of the time of his motion.
Judge, Congress did change the law after sentencing in the First Step Act. That was a terrible mistake. Congress specifically did not make that change retroactively. And you saw that, and you thought it was extraordinary and compelling.
Exactly.
Even though Congress specifically did not make it retroactive. You chose to rewrite the law because you were sympathetic to a fentanyl drug kingpin whom you had expressed frustration at having sentenced him to his 20-year sentence in the first place. You twisted the law and you rewrote it so you could cut the sentence of a drug kingpin. That's what you did, Judge.
Respectfully, Senator, I disagree. Congress.
You can respectfully disagree all that you want, but the fact of the matter is that you decided to use your discretion and you basically rewrote the law yourself, because as Tom Cotton said, this was not retroactive at all. It was not meant to be retroactive. It was not written in the law to be retroactive, but you decided to go ahead and make it retroactive. In other words, you rewrote the sentence utilizing the First Step Act and thought that, you know what, it wasn't fair the first time, so I'm going to make sure that it's fair this time. Again, on the side of the criminals, not on the side of the victims.
Congress provided judges through the compassionate release motion mechanism with the opportunity to review sentences. Congress, prior to the compassionate release mechanism being enacted, a judge who imposed a sentence would have no opportunity to revisit. In Mr. Young's case, the question was, with this compassionate release motion, under a circumstance in which Congress had changed the law, was that an extraordinary and compelling circumstance to revisit his sentence? And I made a determination that it was.
So I suppose then, if you're confirmed, we can just count on you to always rule in favor of retroactivity, no matter what the facts of the case are, because it was a blatant rewrite of the law here, so you could reduce the sentence of a drug kingpin if you didn't like sentencing to 20 years in the first place.
I couldn't have put it better. That's exactly what this was. She was frustrated at the very beginning of the case that she didn't want to give. She apologizes. She apologizes, folks. She apologizes to a hardened criminal who's distributing heroin. And she's apologizing to him that she has to give him 20 years. She's sorry. Where's the apology again to the victims? Where's the apology to the public that you have criminals out here running around doing this and you have a chance to put them away for a long, long time, and you're sorry that you have to do that? And the first chance that you get when because of the way Congress rewrites a law, and then you decide to take it into your own hands and then rewrite it even further when it's not supposed to be retroactive, you decide to cut that sentence short by almost 50%. Shame on you, Judge. Shame on you, Ketanji, Brown, Jackson. Shame, shame, shame for always taking the side of the criminals and basically screwing over the victims. Folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch our reaction video. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you haven't already done so, we'd love you to subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow us. Hit that notification bell. And you've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your guest host today. My name is Dr. Shaikh, and I'll leave you with my final thought as I always do, which is when you're right, you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. We'll see you again next time, folks. Take care and stay safe.